I just recently finished Starfield, and now I finally get why this might be the most hated video game in the past 10 years. And I really don't know what broke me the most. The countless loading screens, the soulless NPCs, or the fact that I paid $70 in the PlayStation Store to play this trash. And the only reason why I did this is to finally find out if Starfield actually deserves all the hate it gets. And the short answer is yes. But the long answer is much more interesting. Because about 3 hours into playing the game, I found out that the game by far doesn't get enough hate, especially for what it is and how Bethesda promoted it. And you're about to see how my slight enthusiasm when starting the game got absolutely destroyed after the 20th fetch quest, the 15th planet that looked the same, and the 4th time my game crashed out of nowhere. But I kept playing. I finished the entire main story of the game, and now all I want is my time and money back. And honestly, I probably have to blame myself, because the warning signs were there. I have read all of them before starting the game. See, I watched the 2-hour essays tearing the game apart. I watched Todd Howard standing on stage, promoting the game like it was the revolution we were all waiting for. And I watched gameplays, where I could see the game with my own eyes. And through all of that, one pattern became impossible to miss. Everyone was hating on Starfield. Just to put that into perspective, I started watching 3 different Let's Play channels starting this game, and all of them released a statement at some point saying that they are pausing their Let's Plays because they feel no joy in playing this game at all. And if you dig deeper, the problems of this game are just getting more and more ridiculous and more understandable why people hated this game. I mean, there are videos out there counting the loading screens. There are compilations of NPCs staring into the camera like they just had the worst trauma of their lives, and entire essays about single planets that were just empty. The hate about Starfield basically became its own genre, and I'm pretty sure some of those videos got more views than the game has players left. And the wildest parts were the comment sections, because under every single one of those videos, the comments were a battlefield. One side saying that the game was an absolute insult, and the other side saying that you are just playing the game wrong, that everything gets better after the first 40 hours. And even to this day, I'm still not sure if those positive comments were actually positive or just rage bait. So yes, I knew all of those problems before. I had seen the numbers, the memes, the essays, and all of the comments. But I went ahead and bought the game anyways. Like I said, at full price, in 2026. For a 2023 game everyone hates. Yes, you don't have to understand that. And after buying, I immediately had a weird feeling. However, my brain started justifying it by saying something like, hey man, you have a massive weakness for space settings. Remember, your favorite mission in Wolfenstein was when you suddenly walk through a glass dome on the moon. You will like this game. And the other argument my brain gave me was that the game might probably be better now. I mean, I got the 2026 PS5 version of the game. Maybe Bethesda fixed everything and all those videos you've watched, they are outdated. So I waited until I downloaded the 100-something gigabytes. I made a character and started playing. And I need to be honest with you about what happened in those first few hours. Because that's the part nobody warned me about. Because the first few hours of the game were actually quite good. You start the game as a miner on some dusty moon, and you do what miners do. You are trying to extract some rare materials. However, it doesn't take long until you more or less accidentally touch a mysterious artifact. You get knocked out, and 10 minutes later, someone hands you a spaceship. I know there's a lot of stuff and story happening in between, but the storytelling was so boring that I already forgotten most of it. But we'll get into that in just a second. Now, when I flew with that ship for the first time and saw the planet from above, my brain once more told me, see, I told you this game is not as bad as everyone said. Look how amazing the space looks. And I have to give credit where credit is due. The game definitely fits the whole NASA punk style, with the white spacesuits, the industrial spaceships, and everything basically looks like it was made out of real NASA hardware, just with 100 years of extra budget. And the same happened to me when I landed in New Atlantis for the first time, with the towers, the waters, and the shuttles taking off the distances. I just stood there for a moment, looked around, and I was quite impressed. And right there, I remembered the headlines about the PS5 version, where reviewers were calling it the best Starfield has ever been. And standing in Death City, in those first hours, I genuinely believed them. And for a moment, it looked like this video right here almost never got made, or maybe it would have gotten a very different title. However, while I was busy being impressed, the small things already started cracking. Because at one point, I started realizing that there was a suspicious amount of very long loading screens. See, the first time I noticed this was when I got a loading screen upon entering a building in New Atlantis. At this point, I didn't really think about it. But the next one happened not even a minute later, when I entered an elevator. And this is where I started asking myself, wait, didn't I just see a long loading screen like this just a minute ago? And then I started noticing that with basically every scene change, the game gives you an endless loading screen. You enter a ship, you get a loading screen. You leave the planet, you get a loading screen. You land on a new planet, well, you get another loading screen. And somewhere around my second hour playing this game, I started counting. But this wasn't the only thing that started to annoy me, because the next thing that started bothering me were the NPCs. And I knew that they looked off from all the videos I've watched, but I didn't know that it was this bad. I mean, just look at this face. The eyes look right through you, they move in a weird way, and every single one of them gives you the same uncanny energy. And my brain, the same brain that had taught me into buying this game, kept moving it all over. I had thoughts like, sure, this game isn't perfect, but it has thousands of planets. Of course there are going to be loading screens. Or something like, just get over it, you will get used to the faces. However, after like the 30th loading screen, I simply stopped listening to those false positive thoughts, because I realized something about Starfield. And this is the most accurate way I can describe this game. This entire thing is a giant facade. If you look at it only once, without interacting with anything, it's great. However, the problem starts when you look twice. And from hour 3 on, I simply couldn't ignore it anymore. And the first thing you see when you look twice at Starfield is the technology. Now remember the setup here. I was playing the 2026 PS5 version, 2.5 years of patches, dozens of updates, and I was playing on a console. The one platform where every game gets tested for exactly this one piece of hardware. And on top of that, I had 0 mods installed. Everything was basically in factory settings. And the game still crashed on my almost brand new PS5, out of nowhere. And of course, it happened in the worst possible moment, because I had just cleared out an entire outpost. My inventory was full of loot, and I was on my way back to the ship, when the screen froze. And half a second later, I was staring at the error code, and another second later, I was looking at the PlayStation dashboard. The massive problem was, there was no autosave, and the real last save was about 20 minutes old, which means I got to clear the exact same outpost a second time. And in a game where every fight already feels the same, this is a very special kind of punishment. And look, that a game crashes on a PS5 is nothing special. It happens. And the first time this happened with Starfield, I didn't thought badly about it. But then, it happened again. And then, again. By the end of my playthrough, my personal scoreboard saw that 8 crashes, 6 complete freezes, and loading screens so long, I sometimes checked if my console was still working. And at some point, because I had so much time staring at broken screens, I tried to find some patterns in the freezes, so I could, well, prevent them. And it turned out that there actually is a pattern. Every few hours, I would open the star map or my inventory and the game would stop for 10 or 15 seconds. The first time, I thought my PS5 had died. But by the third time, I had learned to just sit there and wait, like you do with an old car that needs a moment before the engine starts. And my absolute favorite routine was selling loot. Because if you leave the building, you get a loading screen. You take the transit, another loading screen. You enter the shop, and another loading screen. Then you sell your stuff, and then the entire thing again, just in reverse. There were 6 loading screens just to sell some freaking guns. And keep in mind, this is the version they had 2.5 years to repair. This is the version the reviewers called a comeback, and the best state it has ever been in. And if this is the best version they have ever made, I generally don't want to know how this thing felt in 2023. Well, actually I do know, because I watched all the videos of people complaining about it. Anyway, it didn't take long until there was a thing I can't fully explain. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who felt this, because somewhere around hour 5 or 6, I got the feeling that the game was getting uglier with every hour. Like, it felt the graphics were slowly getting worse the longer I played. And that made basically no sense to me. So I actually went back and compared my early footage with what I was currently seeing on my screen. And the result was that the game looked exactly the same. Nothing had changed. However, what has changed was me and my perception about the game. Because in some way, and I don't know how to describe it, but the honeymoon filter, for lack of better words, was gone. See, in the first hours, your brain is busy being impressed by the skyboxes and the NASA design. But once that wears off, you start seeing what is actually in front of you. The same handful of wall textures, the same prefab rooms, planets that look beautiful from orbit and completely dead when you land on them. So the game basically runs out of new things to show to you. And at some point, your brain starts noticing this. And then we need to talk about the shooting. Because people forget this, but Starfield is for huge stretches a first-person shooter. That is the main way the game talks to you. Something stands in the corridor and you shoot at it. And for a shooter, this thing plays terribly. The guns feel like toys, like those old Nerf blasters. And it feels like Bethesda didn't improve their shooting mechanics since Fallout 4. And what makes this even worse is the level system. Because Bethesda apparently decided to not put more than 2 hours of thoughts into it. See, if an enemy is a few levels above you, the game just gives them a bigger health bar and more damage. That's it. That's the whole difficulty system. I have emptied entire magazines into a pirate's helmet, watched him flinch 20 times in the same way, and then reload my own gun twice before he finally fell over. And please don't get me started with the AI of the enemies, because they are way more A than they are I. Anyways, just so we are on the same page, I didn't expect some incredibly hard enemies like in Dark Souls, but the AI in Starfield was beyond dumb. I watched an enemy sprint into cover and then stand up behind it, facing the wrong direction. I have had enemies walking straight past me in the middle of a firefight, like I was a coworker they didn't want to talk to. And at one point, 2 spacers just stood next to each other, staring into the void. I was able to take them down one by one. And the best thing is that they didn't even notice it while I did this. And the enemies themselves? Over my entire playthrough, it felt like I was fighting the same 3 guys over and over again the whole time. It was a pirate in a spacesuit, a mercenary in a slightly different spacesuit, and a robot. In the beginning, the fights were okay-ish, because I didn't know that this was going to be all the game had to offer. But by the middle of the game, they were completely boring. And by last third, I had completely changed the way I played, because I would go ahead and just run straight past the enemies, booster pack over their heads, grab the objectives, and go back to the ship. But the most insane thing is that the game barely punished me for it. I mean, most enemies simply forgot I existed after about 50 meters, which tells you everything about how much effort Bethesda actually put into the fighting system. And before you light the torches and grab the pitchforks, no, it's not a skill issue. The game was at no point too hard. Wolfenstein: The New Order at max difficulty settings was too hard. But this was just a shitshell of hollow fights with no meaning. But let's take a step back and just recap for a moment before we dive into even more insane topics of what my experience looked like in the first few hours. The game crashed and froze. The loading screens were endless. The graphic was for some reason getting worse for every hour I played the game, and the shooting was boring me to death. However, I could have seen past all of that, because none of what I said was the main reason someone buys Starfield. The game was so hyped for a single reason: to explore an entire galaxy with thousands of planets. So I opened the map, picked a random planet that looked interesting, and flew there. But what happened next is where Starfield actually lost me. So let's take a look at what happened on the planet. Because I landed, stepped out of my ship, and looked around to figure out what was happening on that planet. And to be fair, the first impression was fine. The planet had rocky hills, some alien plants, and a couple of weird things wobbling around in the distance. So I scanned some rocks, shoot one of the creatures, and then my scanner showed me a point of interest. It was an abandoned research facility which was only a few hundred meters away. So I went over there, fought my way through a handful of pirates, found some dead scientists, read a note about an experiment that went wrong, grabbed the loot, and went back to my ship. And my honest verdict after that first planet was okay. It wasn't mind-blowing, but it was okay. So I picked the next planet. Different star system, different climate. And instead of a rocky desert, I got a frozen tundra. I landed, stepped out, and once more, my scanner showed me a point of interest. Which, surprise, was once more an abandoned research facility. Now at first I thought, sure, why not? The whole galaxy probably has more than one research facility. In real life, that would make sense. But then, I walked in. And then I thought I just had a stroke, because that research facility had the exact same entrance, the same hallways, the same rooms, and the same dead scientists lying in the exact same positions. And on the same desk, the exact same note about the exact same experiment that went wrong. And for a second, I genuinely thought I had flown in a circle and landed back on the first planet. That's how identical the building was. But no, I was in a different solar system, light years away from the first one, standing in a perfect copy of the building I had just cleared about 20 minutes earlier. And this is where it got me, because the game had simply copy and pasted the entire building, including the corpses. And this is where I completely cracked, because you just need a bit of common sense to understand that you don't build the same research facility on a rocky desert in the same way as you do on a frozen tundra. Now anyways, from that moment on, it never stopped. On the third planet, I found the same building again, and this time I could walk through it blindfolded. I knew where the enemies were standing, I knew which room had the loot crate, and I knew what note on the desk was going to say, before I even picked it up. At some point, I had seen this one dead scientist so many times that he started feeling like a coworker to me. And I already talked about this in another video about open world games, which I'm going to link you at the end of this one. But in there, I talked about my very first attempt at this game and how it broke me after the first 3 hours. Because of exactly one of these buildings. Back then, I thought I simply got unlucky, but now I know this is just what the game is. So just like the loading screens, I started counting. Every time I discovered a new planet, I found the exact same 3 buildings, the same cave and the same corpses. And somewhere around the 15 planets that looked exactly like the one before, I stopped counting. I had simply accepted that the thousands of games I bought this game for are basically the same 3 planets with a different sky color. And this is exactly where we need to talk about the most famous promise of this entire game. Because in 2022, Todd Howard stood on stage and said a sentence that sold Starfield to millions of people. He said there are going to be over 100 star systems, over 1,000 planets, and you can land anywhere. And the crazy part about this is that this promise is technically true. You can really land anywhere. I tested it. I flew to some random frozen moon at the edge of a settled solar system, a place with nothing on it but ice. And you know what was waiting for me down there? The same abandoned facility with my scientist coworker on it. So yes, you can land anywhere. It just doesn't matter where you land. And this sentence from Todd Howard is probably the most insane mind-bending I have heard in the last 3 years. So I went online and did some research, and listening to some of the other essays out there more closely, it turned out that the planets in Starfield aren't hand-built worlds. They are procedurally generated, meaning the computer builds the landscapes and then it sprinkles the same handful of pre-built buildings and the caves on top of it. And the best comparison I can come up for this is that Starfield is like a hotel with 1,000 rooms. But every single door opens into the exact same room, with the same furniture and the same blood on the carpet. Now those machine-generated planets already got me. But the place where this whole repetition thing finally broke me was the temples. See, pretty early in the main story, the game sends you to a so-called temple to unlock your first power. And those powers reminded me of something we're going to talk about in just a second. But that first temple visit was actually kind of cool. You step inside, the gravity turns off, and you float through a dark room. Then you start chasing little clusters of glowing lights while giant metal rings spin in the middle of the room. Until a portal opens, you fly through it, and boom, you received a new power. The first time I did this, I thought, this was short, but okay, it looked nice. It reminded me very much of like the ancient shrines in Breath of the Wild. However, it impressed me for about 10 seconds. Because then I found out how the rest of the system works. Because there are 24 powers in this game, which means 24 temples. And every single one of them is the exact same room. The same darkness, the same floating, and the same glowing lights. There is no variation, Bethesda didn't build any twist, and basically they didn't have any new idea. You simply repeat the same 90 seconds, copy and paste it 24 times across the entire galaxy. But what really hit me is that the entire mechanic gets even worse with the new Game Plus. Because in there, you can upgrade each power to level 10, which means to max out every power, a player would technically have to repeat the exact same 90-second floating minigame 240 times. And honestly, I'd rather punch myself in the face than to do this whole thing just one more time, let alone 240 times. Anyway, I think I did about 5 of them during my playthrough, and by that time I was floating through that stardust with the enthusiasm of a man renewing his car insurance. So after the 5th time, I simply stopped. And I think this describes Starfield the best. I stopped collecting the powers that make my character stronger in a role-playing game, because it simply wasn't worth all the boredom I had to go through. And there really was no reason for me to do so, because like I said earlier, I didn't even need more powers to deal with the enemies. I could either just shoot at them for longer periods of time, or just do the roadrunner and run straight past them. And the cherry on top of all of this emptiness is how you move through it. And that is because those points of interest are pretty far apart. We are talking about a few hundred meters and sometimes kilometers of walking through landscapes where absolutely nothing happens. And Bethesda knew that, because when Todd Howard was asked why a space game playing in the year 2030 has no vehicles, this was his answer. Once you do vehicles, it does change the gameplay. It lets us make it an experience where we know how fast they are seeing things. Which is a very elegant way of saying, that's actually pretty smart, but we didn't add that to the game for whatever weird reason. Maybe no one thought about it, or everyone was busy animating the uncanny faces of the NPCs. However, 1 year later, Bethesda changed that, and at Gamescom 2024, they announced the REV8, which is a land vehicle delivered in a free update. Now, my 2026 version of the game already came with that vehicle, so I can tell you exactly what driving across those planets feels like. It's the same boring nothing, you're just a little bit faster. So, anyway, at some point I made my peace with the planets. Exploring wasn't going to save this game for me, but I wasn't done yet, because everyone, the comments, the reviews and the defenders, they kept pointing at the same thing. The faction quests. They were saying that's where Starfield actually gets good. The factions are the real game. So I flew back to Civilization, picked the faction that sounded the most interesting and signed up. And that decision introduced me to the absolute worst side of Starfield, the fetch quests. And I probably don't need to explain it to you, because you probably know the structure of a fetch quest. If you played any video game in the last 10 years from any AAA publisher, you've played at least a dozen fetch quests. Someone gives you a task, you have to go somewhere, you kill or collect something, and then you bring it back. That's the loop. Now, usually games throw in these fetch quests as side activities, so you can unlock extra stuff. However, in Starfield, every single main quest and every single main activity is built around a fetch quest. But let me start from the beginning. See, the faction I picked was Ryujin Industries, a mega corporation in Neon, which is basically Starfield's cyberpunk city. On paper, this is the most interesting premise in the entire game. You join the evil corporation, you climb the ladder, and you do corporate espionage between the neon lights of the city. It basically gave me the option to get a bit of a Cyberpunk 2077 vibe in the game. And honestly, the questline starts kind of charming. I sat through an actual job interview where I applied, answered a question, and I got the job. And initially I thought, this might bring some personality to the game, because this was genuinely something new. And then I got my first official mission as the newest employee of this galactic mega corporation. Grab a coffee. And I'm not making this up. My boss sent me to a coffee shop called Terra Brew, told me I could skip the line if I drop her name, and then I carried that coffee order back through half the city, which once more included countless loading screens. But I went through it and handed the cups to a conference room full of executives. And it was not that I could press a button and everyone got their coffee. I had to give it to every single one of them, one by one. And look, I get the idea. It's supposed to be satire. Haha, corporate life, the intern does the coffee run. And as a one-time gag, it's actually funny. The problem is what came after. Because my next missions were go to that office and pick up a package, go to that building and plant this item, fly to that station, talk to this guy, and then fly back and tell your boss what he said. Like the people in the 24th century didn't have a phone or email. And basically, I was a space intern doing space errands. And the game kept baiting and switching me that the real espionage would start any minute now. Just like in any corporate job, promising you that if you just do this one more thing, you will get promoted. Anyway, I got a bit carried off there. But somewhere in there, I once more started counting. Because while I was doing the 20th fetch quest, I was asking myself, what am I doing with my life? And I wish I could tell you that somewhere in the entire quest line, at one point, I was going to do something special. However, it wasn't. And Region is no exception here. The other factions I played ran on the exact same skeleton. Even the main story is built around the exact same mechanic. Fly to a planet, grab an artifact, bring it back to your clubhouse. And then again. And the entire premise of the game, to solve the epic mystery of the universe, is structured like you're some Amazon driver. And in case you ever run out of handmade errands, the game has a solution for that too. Because in every major city, there is a mission board, which is basically a vending machine for fetch quests. You press a button and the computer generates one for you. Bring 3 units of iron to this moon. Kill the pirates in that system. Deliver this crate to that outpost. So even if you somehow finished all the handwritten fetch quests in this game, Starfield can basically produce infinite new fetch quests for you out of thin air. I remember another one of those pre-launch promises. Because Todd Howard didn't just promise 1,000 planets. He also promised that Starfield would have more handcrafted content than Skyrim and Fallout 4 combined, just in dialogue. And if you look at it, there are over 250,000 of dialogue. And you know what? I believe it, because the people in this game talk. They talk a lot. However, it feels more like someone went to ChatGPT and generated those 250,000 lines of dialogue just to fill it with something, instead of, well, filling the conversation in the game with anything meaningful. And it's because after finishing the game, I can tell you, I cannot remember a single conversation where anything I said actually changed anything. Again, this game has 250 lines of dialogue, and not one of them ever asked me to make a decision that somehow changed the game. And with that, we arrive at the thing that broke this game for me more than anything else. Because at some point, I started testing this game. I started testing it actively. I want to know if there's anything I can do in this world that it actually reacts to. And the best example is a mission where everyone kept telling me about. This mission is called Sabotage, the big one near the end of the Ryujin questline. You have to go and infiltrate a rival mega corporation called Infinity Ltd. And you have to go there to steal a prototype. The game presents you with this beautiful menu of options. You can either sneak in through the maintenance tunnels, or you can walk in through the front door with a fake identity. It looked like I was going to finally get an amazing mission I'm going to remember now. Spoiler, yes, I remember the mission, but not because it was so good. And it is because my entire infiltration lasted about 4 minutes. Then someone spotted me and the situation escalated into me shooting my way through the entire building, floor by floor. And now guess what happens afterwards? Well, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I walked out of that building over a carpet of dead security guards, flew back to Ryujin, and my boss congratulated me on a job well done. I got the full reward, no consequences, and nobody at Infinity ever came after me. Now to be fair, I believe there might have been one line where my boss told me that I caused her a lot of trouble, but that she took care of it. And that's it. I mean, just think about it. I was a spy, stealing stuff from a different mega corporation. Getting caught in a situation like this in real life would have cataclysmic consequences. But in Starfield, the perfect stealth run and the massacre led to the exact same result. The game literally does not care how you do anything. And once I saw that, I saw it everywhere. I mean, just go and try to shoot an important character in the face. Well, you can't kill them. The game won't let you. They go down on one knee, wait a few seconds, like they're taking a break at the gym, and then they stand back up and continue talking to you like nothing happened. Or, here's my favorite one. You can basically join every faction in this game at the same time. I was a corporate agent, a space sheriff, and a pirate simultaneously. And not a single person in this universe ever said something about it. I had 3 careers that should be at war with each other, but they were all running peacefully in parallel in the same save file. And this is the moment where Starfield completely fell apart for me. Because this is a game that sells itself as a multiverse. There are infinite realities, anything is possible. And at the same time, it's so terrified of letting you make a real decision that it wrapped every single mechanic in protective foam. And my favorite comparison is The Witcher. See, The Witcher lets you be wrong. It lets you live with the consequences of your actions. And The Witcher is a game that isn't built around an entire multiverse. I mean, just think about it. If you made a mistake in Starfield, you killed someone important, but you still want to finish the questline, you just fly to another parallel universe where you never did that and you keep going where you left off. However, Starfield simply doesn't let you do that, which is such a huge missed opportunity. And instead of building something like that in, Starfield decided that you simply can't be anything. And you might think that this was the point where I finally gave up on this game. But while I was grinding through all of those errands, something else once more started to annoy me. Because everything in this game felt strangely familiar. And somewhere around my 26th errand, it finally clicked why. And that's because Bethesda had built this exact game before, just way better. And that game is called Skyrim. And even if you've never played Skyrim yourself, everyone knows Skyrim. It's one of the most successful video games ever made. It sold over 60 million copies. It got re-released on basically every device with a screen. At some point, they even released it on Amazon Alexa, and I really wish I was joking. But the more I played Starfield, the clearer it became. Bethesda didn't use Skyrim as an inspiration for this game. They basically used Skyrim as a template. They copied their own biggest game in the most lazy way possible, renamed a few files, and shipped it to space. And I can prove that to you. So let's start with the main character. Because in Skyrim, you are the Dragonborn, the chosen person in the entire world who can absorb the souls of dragons and use their language as magic. In Starfield, you accidentally touch a rock in a mine, you're the only one who gets visions from it, and the game starts calling you, well, you're now the Starborn. Now, Starborn, Dragonborn, they didn't even change the grammar of the word. I honestly believe that somewhere at Bethesda, someone opened the lore document, hit find and replace, swapped the word dragon for star, and called it a day. And remember when I talked about the temples, when I said those powers reminded me of something? Well, this is what it reminded me of. Because in Skyrim, the Dragonborn collects shouts, which are magical abilities you unlock one by one at special locations spread across the entire continent. And in Starfield, it's the exact same thing. The Starborn collects powers, which are once more magical abilities you unlock one by one at special locations spread across the galaxy. He simply took the fantasy magic system, painted it in silver, and called it space magic. It's the same slot, it has the same function, and it's the same Chosen One fantasy. The only difference, in Skyrim, those locations were hand-built dungeons. And in Starfield, it's the same copy-pasted zero-gravity room 24 times. And once you see a first copy, you simply can't stop finding them. Because once more, Skyrim has a handful of factions, each with their own questline, all joinable in the same playthrough. Now, Starfield on the other side, well, it has a handful of factions with their own quest lines, all joinable in the same playthrough. And the mission board I've talked about earlier, the one that auto-generates fetch quests, well, that's Bethesda's Radiant system. And this is the same auto-generated quest technology they've been shipping since Skyrim. In 2011, that system was a way to add additional side quests on top of the handcrafted main missions. But in Starfield, they decided they apparently don't need handcrafted main missions anymore. They would just build the entire game around auto-generated quests, or at least that's what the whole thing feels like. And that someone like me, someone who has never played Skyrim seriously, noticed this is sad enough, but we're going to get into more detail in just a second. Anyway, the copying even goes down to the technical level, because Starfield runs on the Creation Engine, which is an upgraded version of the same engine that Skyrim ran on in 2011. And that's why everything in this game feels so weirdly familiar. The way NPCs zoom into your face when a conversation starts. The way every building is its own separate box. And yes, the same engine logic that chops the world into small cells is the exact reason why you're watching all those loading screens. Bethesda simply decided to take the foundation of a 12-year-old game, change nothing. No, they didn't even not change nothing, they even reduced the amount of handcrafted content, slapped a spacesuit on all of it, and called it a day. But the place where the copy machine did the most damage are the people. I told you about the faces already, but the real problem with the NPCs sits deeper. Because no one, not a single person in this entire universe has a single rough edge. Every single character talks like they went through the same HR seminar. The pirates are polite, the corporate bosses are polite. Even the people who are supposed to threaten you sound like they are reading from a customer service script. And the companions are the worst part, because this game gives you a crew of potential best friends. And every single one of them has the exact same moral compass. And it went this far that the community now calls them the lawful good wet blankets. And honestly, I couldn't have described them better. When you steal a pen, someone disapproves it. You solve a fight with your gun instead of your words, you will hear disappointed sighs all around. It felt like I was flying through an infinite universe with a crew of parents who had just told that I got an F in math class. And at some point, I started asking myself, how does a studio write 250,000 lines of dialogue and doesn't include a single memorable character? And it's the part that shocked me really, because nothing, and I mean nothing about this world is worth remembering. And here is my honest confession. I finished this game, the entire main story, and if you ask me right now why humanity left Earth, which would be a great thing to know in a sci-fi game where humans don't live on Earth anymore, I would have to Google the explanation. I know the game might have told me at some point, and I know that there might have been a quest about it. But it left my brain the moment where the credits rolled, because it was delivered with the emotional weight of a Wikipedia article. And now compared it to something like Star Wars, where a random alien sitting in the background of one cantina scene for 4 seconds has a name, a backstory, and people discussing online about it. And it's the same with every faction of the game, because none of them contains a single original idea. The pirates are called the Crimson Fleet, and their big questline is, and please hold on your seat, hunting the legendary treasure of a dead pirate. The cowboy faction lives on a dusty desert planet, wears cowboy hats, and made me a deputy with a badge. The Cold Bros living in the Neon City. The scientists live in a lab, and every single faction in this game is the first Google result for its genre. Oh, and my favorite detail, even joining the pirates, the ones that don't have a moral compass, comes with guardrails. Because to join the Crimson Fleet, the game first makes you an undercover informant for the space police. So that becoming a pirate is officially allowed. So even becoming a criminal in this game comes with a permission slip. And by this point, my list looked like this. The planets were copies of each other, the quests were errands, the people are basically made out of cardboard, and the whole game was a photocopy of a fantasy game from 2011. And I know what some of you are thinking. If you dislike this game this much, why didn't you idiot just stop playing? And that's a fair question. And it's because of one thing I kept reading online over and over again. People would write these sentences under every critical video. The sentence that kept me going through all of it. Just wait for the ending. The ending changes everything. So I pushed through it. I pushed to the end of the main story, and I need you to hear what this game considers as an ending. And yes, just as a fair warning, there will be spoilers ahead. But let's be honest, you're not going to play this game anyway if you haven't yet. So, the whole main story, you're collecting these artifacts, the metal things that gave you visions in the intro. Your group of space explorers, called Constellation, keeps sending you out to these damned fetch quests that once more only consists of fly there, grab the artifact, bring it home. But along the way, you learn that you are not the only Starborn. You meet two others, one who wants you, one who wants to recruit you. And all of this builds toward one place, the things all the artifacts point to. A giant, glowing something at the center of the whole mystery. And they call it the Unity. And the game does a lot of build-up around this thing. And everyone in the entire galaxy keeps talking about the Unity in this half-religious whisper. And therefore, you as the player keep asking yourself, what is it? What's behind it? Why do these artifacts even exist? This is the question the entire game runs on. The one mystery that kept me collecting space rocks for 40-something hours, which in hindsight feels like the biggest bait and switch I have ever witnessed in my life since quitting my corporate job. Anyway, after the final mission, I flew there. I landed, and I walked up a long glowing path. And at the top, the game delivers the great final revelation. You meet yourself. A shimmering space magic version of you standing at the center of the universe. And this cosmic version of you explains what the Unity actually is. So, are you ready? It's a door, and if you step through it, you get reborn in a parallel universe, and everything resets. Your ship is gone, your money is gone, your weapons, your outpost, your companion, and every single damn quest you finished, every relationship you built is gone too. Yes, you keep your space magic, and you get a fancy Starborn ship. And then you get to play the exact same game over again. And that's it. That's the secret at the end of Starfield. The great cosmic answer this whole game builds up for its entire runtime is a New Game Plus screen with lore wrapped around it. And I stood there, at the literal center of the universe. And I sat on my couch and started laughing. Because think about what this game just told me. After all those hours of copy-pasted planets, recycled buildings, and identical templates, the big payoff is to play the whole game all over again. And Bethesda didn't even hide this. Todd Howard himself framed Starfield as a game that was intentionally built to be played for a very, very long time. And the whole design points at it. Remember the temples I told you earlier? These powers go up to rank 10. And the fancy Starborn ship, it upgrades every time you play the game again, up to New Game Plus 10. I just want to mention how insane this is, because I have never in my life played a game 10 times. Even one of my favorite games of all time, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I didn't play it 10 times. But Starfield, a mediocre game at best, doesn't just offer you to replay it. The entire progression system demands you that you are going to do this 10 times. And this is where all the defenders were right. The regame starts at New Game Plus. And I looked into it because I want to be fair. And yes, if you jump universes, there are a handful of scripted surprises waiting. Sometimes something about the crew is very different. And the internet loves listing these moments. And a handful of them are genuinely clever ideas. But here's the problem. Those are just a few minutes of new content. The other 99% of Universe Number 2 is the same planets, the same free buildings, the same co-worker, and the same fetch quest. And the regain that is supposedly starting in New Game Plus is, all in all, pretty much the same game. And before someone writes in the comments, yes, I skipped the UC Vanguard questline, the one that everyone, including the haters, calls the best part of Starfield. And that's on me. But I want you to think about what this actually means. I played this game to the end. 3 full faction careers. And the allegedly best content in the game is so optional and so disconnected from everything else that the game never gave me a single reason to go there. In The Witcher, I stumbled into the best quests by accident. And in Starfield, you have to either be a psychopath and search the entire game to find it out, or you have to Google it. So no, I did not jump into Universe number 2 to play it all over again. I stepped through the Unity exactly once, because I wanted to see the ending with my own eyes. But the only thing that happened was that the screen went white and the credits rolled. And I want to describe to you what I felt in that moment, because it's the most depressing thing I can say about a video game. I felt relieved. I wasn't sad that it's over, like at the end of Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I didn't feel that emptiness I felt after beating the Orphan of Cause in Bloodborne. I was just happy that it was over. And the best way to describe how you feel when finishing it is the feeling of finally finishing your tax report. And just to put that into perspective, I wasted over 40 hours, $70, and the best moment this game ever gave me was when it was over. Now, when I was finished with the game, I turned off my PlayStation, and then I did what you do at 2 in the morning after a breakup. I picked up my phone and started watching the same essays I had watched before even playing the game. And while reading through the comments, I saw all of it with very different eyes and have seen the most justified hate I have ever seen in my life for a video game. Because there were countless of players complaining about the game. And this is where the title of the video becomes literal. Because before playing the game, I knew that people were angry, especially if you were a die-hard Bethesda fan who was hyped for this game. But once I read everything again and watched the essays, I finally understood what they meant. And I realized that it wasn't like a few players here and there who were angry. I have seen that about 99% of the players who touched this game absolutely hated it. So let's start with the reviews. Because when Starfield launched, the professional critics were actually pretty happy. The review score landed somewhere in the mid-A's, which is a pretty solid score. But the user score on Metacritic told a wildly different story, because it landed at a 5.6 on TC. And this gap is the entire story of Starfield in 2 numbers. The journalists who played it for 2 hours who worked to write a review, they liked it. But the people who paid $70 for it played the game to really experience it. And they hated it. But you can argue about review scores all day. Maybe the haters were just louder. Maybe it got review bombed. So instead of arguing, let's take a look at what players actually did. On its launch weekend, in September 2023, Starfield was the biggest launch in Bethesda's history. 6 million players on day 1. On Steam alone, over 330,000 people were playing the game at the same time. And keep in mind, Microsoft had paid $7.5 billion for Bethesda's parent company. And Starfield was basically the holy grail of that purchase. It went this far that Microsoft's own CEO even celebrated publicly because no game has ever added more Game Pass subscribers in a single day. By December, 30 million people had played Starfield, and by 2024, 15 million. Now, if you think about it, the 50 million players for a second, that is roughly the population of a small country. And all of them had the same miserable experience of walking through the same free copy and pasted buildings. And then, those 15 million players people made one of the biggest mic drops in gaming history. Because 6 months after launch, 97% of the Steam players were gone. And look, every game loses players after launch. That's completely normal. But this is a different category. 97% in half a year is the kind of number you usually see when a live service game announces its own shutdown. And if you look at more recent numbers, today, as I'm recording this, Starfield's daily peak on Steam sits at around 4,000 players. For a game that Bethesda built, so people would be playing it for a decade. And honestly, there's something poetical about that. Because the game, with about 1,000 empty planets, ended up empty itself, without any players. And the Steam reviews? They tell the same story, just a little bit meaner. Because in December 2023, the same year the game launched, Starfield's recent reviews dropped to mostly negative. It had 37% positive. The biggest launch in the studio's history needed 3 months to reach a review score you usually see on abandoned early access games. And the lifetime rating settled at mixed, with over 170,000 reviews. And buried in that mountain of reviews, one player described this game better than any 2-hour essays I've ever watched. And he said, a game that has an excess of nothingness. I could have saved myself 40 hours and $70 and just read that one review. And the verdict was the same everywhere you looked. One of the biggest streamers on the planet called the main story extraordinarily boring. The video essays kept multiplying, hour-long autopsies with millions of views each. And remember my joke from the beginning of this video, that some of those essays have more views than the game has played left? I actually checked that while writing the video. The big Starfield essays sit at several million views each, and the game's daily player count is 4,000. So it turns out that people tearing the game apart is officially more popular than the game itself. But here is my favorite statistic, the one I had to double check because I didn't believe it at first. Through 2024, Skyrim had more concurrent players on Steam than Starfield. So let me say that again, Skyrim, a 13-year-old game that Starfield was copied from. In some months, the 2011 original game had more than double the players of the 2023 Starfield copy. The audience had both games sitting in the library, looked at them side by side, and went back to the original. And as if all of this wasn't brutal enough already, the timing made it even worse. Because exactly 3 weeks before Starfield, a game called Baldur's Gate 3 has released. And while Starfield was collecting negative reviews, Baldur's Gate 3 was busy becoming the first game in history to sweep all 5 major Game of the Year awards. I mean, these were 2 giant RPGs released in 1 month to the same audience. And while one of them made history, the other one, well, odds made history, but in a very negative way. But we need to be fair, because Starfield did win something, which I almost forgot. See, at the end of 2023, the Steam community voted for the official Steam Awards. And the players of this world came together, looked at everything that is inside the game, which again is the copy-pasted building, the recycled templates, and the Countess fetch quests, and gave Starfield the award for most innovative gameplay. Which had its own very funny reaction, because this just caused the game to get review bombed even more, people calling it sarcasm, and it became an official meme on Reddit. Because it didn't take long until everyone understood that this was just a collective piece of Starfield getting trolled even more. However, there was still one last line of defense, because through all of this, the true believers kept repeating one sentence like a prayer. The modders will fix it. And to be fair, that prayer had history on its side. Modders fixed and extended Skyrim for over a decade now. Half of Skyrim's immortality comes from its own community. However, for Starfield, all of that help came too late, because the official mod tools arrived about 9 months after launch. And by this time, most of the audience had already left the game. And the big modding wave that was supposed to save this game never really came. The scene that built thousands of mods for Skyrim looked at Starfield and quietly decided that not even their free labor could fill 1,000 empty planets. So there was the scoreboard of the game. A 5.6 from the users, mostly negative on Steam, 97% of the players gone within a year. Outplayed by its own 13-year-old templates. And my 40 hours of frustrations multiplied by millions of players. And you would think that a studio watching these numbers would go quiet for a while. That they do a huge emergency meeting, fix the game, and hopefully apologize. Bethesda, however, they choose a very different path. They started arguing with the reviews. And I mean that literally. In November 2023, players started noticing something strange under the negative reviews on Steam. They got official replies from Bethesda. Apparently, the best idea they had during their emergency meeting was to send their own A tier of customer support people and respond to every negative review. However, instead of apologizing, they went ahead and explained to their own paying customers who expressed their opinion about the game on why their criticism was wrong. And if you look at those answers individually, they sound like very thought out messages. But if you read more than a handful of them, you realize that they were just using templates. They use the same copy and pasted paragraphs under review after review. One of them explained that some planets are meant to be empty, that the emptiness is a huge design choice. Another one suggested that the reviewer had simply misunderstood how the game is supposed to be played. And within a few days, screenshots of those were everywhere. Reddit, Twitter, the gaming press, even folks wrote about it or Kotaku. Because everyone understood instantly what they were looking at. A studio, a explaining to its unhappy customers in writing that they had simply misunderstood the game. And yes, this is where the most famous customer support reply in gaming history was born. If you've seen my video about open world games, you already know the line. A player complained that the planets were boring. And Bethesda's reply explains, well, when the astronauts went to the moon, there was nothing there. And the astronauts certainly weren't bored. I don't think I have to say anything about this again, but if you ever want to hear my take on it, make sure to stick around until the end and I will link you my open world video. Now, I want to be fair to the people behind the keyboard. The support agents writing those replies probably didn't invent those replies. Somebody handed them those templates. And honestly, the funniest thing about this entire situation is imagining that you have a customer support job during that time at Bethesda. You show up on a Monday and your task for the week is to argue with the internet about loading screens. Using a folder of pre-approved paragraphs, somebody in a white-collar job somewhere at Bethesda sat in a meeting and decided that the correct response to thousands of negative reviews was to explain to the customers that they were wrong. However, this wasn't limited to some random executive at Bethesda. Even Todd Howard himself defended the game. Because a few weeks after launch, he sat in a Bloomberg interview and got asked a very simple question. Why isn't the game better optimized for PC? And his answer, word for word, was, we did. It's a next-gen PC game. We really do push the technology. So you may need to upgrade your PC for this game. And if you look at what people are describing, it's actually the exact opposite. Because thousands of players with expensive gaming rigs were reporting stutters and crashes. And the head of the studio told them on air that their computers were too cheap. He tried to make everyone believe the game was fine and that the hardware was the problem. As you can imagine, that clip went viral within hours. And you may need to upgrade your PC, instantly joined the Hall of Fame of things gaming executives probably wish they have never said. Right next to the guy who said, "Do you guys not have phones?" And then there's Emil Paridou, who was Starfield's design director. While the reviews were burning, he thought it was a good idea to post this. Funny how disconnected some players are from the realities of game development, and yet they speak with complete authority. And you know what? I can even understand the human being behind that sentence. Because game development is brutally hard, and the internet is absolutely merciless. And this was a team getting dunked on by the entire planet. But look at what that sentence says to a paying customer. The problem, apparently, was your lack of expertise about games. And months later, in May 2024, when the dust had settled and Todd Howard finally addressed the hate directly in an interview, this was his explanation. The game was divisive because it was, quote, different than you've seen from us in the past. And the criticism was perfectly understandable. Which sounds humble. But if you read it again, according to that sentence, the criticism happened because the game was too different. With that, he basically said that the audience was simply surprised. With no word, he said that he can understand that players are angry or pissed off, or that they want their money back because the game was so mid. All he did was to imply that people didn't get the game and expected something else. And that's the thread running through this whole chapter. Go through every statement from that era. The review replies, the Bloomberg interview, the posts or the explanations. And you will find every possible excuse you could come up with. But the one sentence the players were actually waiting for, something like, the game is worse or emptier than we wanted it to be, was never said by anyone. And I think this is the real reason the hate never died down. Players forgive disappointing games all the time. For us, it's basically a yearly tradition at this point. But being told that your disappointment is a misunderstanding by the same people who sold you that disappointment, that is the thing that turns criticism into hate. The game wasted people's time. And then the communication treated them like they were simply too dumb to get the game. But here's the twist. And the reason Starfield fascinates me more than any other bad game. Because while the PR side was correcting the players, the engineering side was actually listening. Because over the next 2 years, behind the scenes, Bethesda went to work. They released patches, updates, new features, city maps, and even the vehicle we talked about earlier. They repaired basically everything on this game that a patch can reach. And the result of those 2 years of repairs is actually the saddest part of this entire story. And I want to be very clear about this, because it matters for everything that follows. most of those repairs worked. The game now runs better, the maps help, and the vehicles get you from point A to point B faster. And piece by piece, Bethesda basically fixed everything on this game that engineering can fix. And we all know this story, right? It's the Cyberpunk 2077 story. A broken, overpromised launch, years of patches, and then came the great redemption. The comeback everyone gets to feel good about. That's the story Starfield was hoping to follow. And honestly, that's half the reason I bought the PS5 version in the first place. But here is why that redemption never happened. And this might be the most important sentence of this entire video. Cyberpunk was a broken code wrapped around a good game. And broken code can be patched. But Starfield was broken code wrapped around a broken game. And there's no patch for bad story, the empty world, or the soulless NPCs. I mean, what are the engineers supposed to do? Rewrite the story from scratch? Fill the empty planets with alien-like theme parks? Or reprogram the NPCs so they don't look this uncanny? And I'm the living proof that no amount of patching can fix this. I played the most repaired, most polished, most praised version of Starfield that has ever existed. Sure, it still crashed 4 times. But the crashes were never the real problem. The real problem was the fouled identical planets, the fetch quests, the guardrails, and nothing really felt like it had a meaning. And every single one of those survived 2.5 years of patches completely unharmed. And the difference to Cyberpunk 2077 is once more, Cyberpunk had a great story, a lively world, and was overall well thought out. Starfield had none of that. So fixing the bugs wouldn't cut it. And even during that time, while Bethesda's engineers gave their best to fix this game, they somehow still managed to reignite the entire hate storm. Because in June 2024, they released the Creation Kit, which was the long-awaited mod tools. And bundled with them came an in-game store. An in-game store with paid content. And in that store sat a mission called the Vulture, which was a single quest for 700 creation credits. If you convert that to real money, it's about $7, which is already pretty expensive. But what made it even worse is that you simply couldn't just buy 700 credits. The smallest bundle you could buy in the store was $10. And the community, which had just barely calmed down, absolutely lost it. The recent reviews on Steam crashed back to mostly negative. And a full year of goodwill and patches were gone within just a week. And if you know your gaming history, this moment was almost nostalgic. Because in 2006, Bethesda invented the paid microtransaction meme with the legendary horse armor in Oblivion, which was the cosmetic armor for horse. And it was the first time that players had to pay real money for an in-game skin. In 2015, they tried paid Skyrim mods, and the backlash was so violent that they pulled the entire system within days. And in 2024, they tried it once more with a $7 quest. Just think about the pure insanity. They tried the same thing 3 times over a span of 18 years, and the reaction was always the same. Their players hated it. So the question becomes, why do they always keep repeating this? And I don't have an answer to that. But luckily, Todd Howard apparently has an explanation. When he was asked, he said, "We hear the feedback." And to his credit, he even admitted that this whole thing looked like, and I'm quoting here, a faction that we are chopping up and then selling it for 700 credits at a time. Which is remarkably honest. Because that's exactly what it was. But it didn't stop there. Because then came September 2024. And with it, Bethesda's next chance at making everything up. Because there, they released their Shattered Space DLC, which was the first big expansion for Starfield. And they charged $30 for it. On paper, it was the answer to every complaint in this video, because this time there were no procedural planets, but one dense, handcrafted world built by hand like in the good old days. But then came the launch, and it landed at a 54 on Metacritic. Once more, mostly negative on Steam, and it became the worst reviewed release in the studio's entire history. And then there's the saddest number of them all. On its launch day, Shattered Space pushed Starfield's player count on Steam to a peak of 21,792. A mainline Bethesda expansion, the first big DLC for the studio's first new universe in 25 years. And not even 22,000 people on Steam showed up to try it out. Emil Parillo, the guy we talked about earlier, who is the design director, said something afterwards that I want to quote directly because I almost feel a bit sorry for him. He said, "If someone played Shattered Space and didn't like the DLC, then honestly, I'm sad." And I believe him. That's a person who spent years building something, watching it release, and no one even wants to try it. And just to be fair, whatever you think about this game, real people poured real years of their lives into it. And I don't think a single one of them wanted any of this. I mean, no one at Bethesda sat down and thought, let's take $250 million, hire thousands of people, and make the worst game we possibly can. And that's exactly what makes Starfield's story so brutal. They fixed the code, they shipped new content, they worked through the whole redemption arc checklist, step by step. And the game stayed exactly as hollow as it was on day one. Because the problem was never on their own checklist. And that brought me back to the very first thing I told you in this video, that I probably have to blame myself for even playing it. Because there's only one question left, and it's bigger than Bethesda. If the evidence was this overwhelming, this public, and this measurable, why did I still pay $70? And even worse, why did 15 million people before me give Bethesda any amount of money? And I want to answer that question honestly, and therefore I can only talk about my own experience. I knew everything, and I mean that literally. I didn't just read some initial press reviews like the people that bought the game in 2023. As I said earlier, I have watched the essays, I have seen the gameplay, and I have literally criticized this game in one of my own videos before ever playing a single minute of it. If there was ever a person on this planet with no excuse to buy it at full price, it was me. And I still bought it anyway. And if I'm being honest about the why, it comes down to the fact that I hoped that I would actually like the game and that the hate about this game would be unjustified, especially now almost 3 years after release. And to be honest, I should have known better. I saw the exact same facts you've seen in this video, and my thoughts simply started justifying it. I told myself, maybe they fixed it by now. You love space, the PS5 version is supposed to be the best one. And here's the thing. Every warning I've read got a maybe in my head. And that's not stupidity, that's hope for me. And in 2026, it seems that hope is what the entire gaming hobby runs on. And this also makes it so scary. Because I can't even promise you that I've learned my lesson. Because next year, some studio will show me a beautiful trailer with the right music, and my brain will start negotiating again. I know it will. That's what being a gamer in 2026 is like. And in 2023, this exact mechanism ran on millions of people with even less information than I had. I mean, again, there were 6 million players on day one, most of whom would see nothing but the trailers. Because somewhere between the 2022 reveal and launch day, one sentence had attached itself to this game. It will be like Skyrim, but in space. And Bethesda happily used it, and so did the press. And we, as the players, we fell for it. We expected endless exploration, just not in a medieval fantasy world, but in a whole galaxy. A galaxy you could live in for a decade. And this is what the 50 million people who pre-ordered the game were expecting. But then the actual game showed up. And here is my personal confession, which makes the whole thing even more absurd. The phrase even worked on me. I have never personally played Skyrim seriously, and it's not an exaggeration. I started the game just a few times. I made it to the first Jarl, which roughly took me about 2 to 3 hours, and then I simply never bothered to play it again. The reason why I'm telling you this is just to show you that I have zero nostalgia for any Bethesda world. I didn't have a childhood in Tamriel, and no thousands of hours in Fallout. But still, Skyrim in space lit something up in my brain. That is how powerful this promise was. It even worked on people who never finished the original game, because in my brain, Skyrim is simply like a quality sign. And this, finally, is the actual answer to the question in the title. Because think about, which games actually get hated? Truly bad games get ignored. Nobody writes a 2-hour essay about a cheap asset flip. Well, maybe except the game the day before, but you get the point. Nobody counts its loading screens. Nobody organizes a troll vote at the Steam Awards for a game they never cared about. However, the hate has to be earned differently. Hate is what happens when a studio you trusted takes the fantasy you've been building for years, and instead of delivering on their promises, they hand you back a shitty game. all that this hate really is the shattered hope of 15 million disappointed people at the same time. So yes, I blame myself for buying the game, which brings me to a question I generally cannot answer on my own. And I'm asking this completely seriously. Should I actually play Skyrim, like properly this time? Because after 40 hours in Starfield, a part of me wants to know what Bethesda changed, what made Skyrim so much better. So please tell me in the comments, is Skyrim in 2026 still worth playing for the first time? Or is it just nostalgia now attached to Skyrim? Anyways, I still feel like I got massively scammed and I still want my time back. I still want my money back, and that hasn't changed since the first minute of this video. And I now finally know that this hate is deserved. And if you're now wondering how we even got here, how open world games went from handcrafted worlds you never want to leave to 1,000 empty planets no one wants to visit, then I have the perfect answer to you. It's the video I promised you earlier. Why open world games are evolving backwards. It's on your screen right now. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you over there.